Welcome to the University of Suffolk. My name is Mohammed Abdel Magid, and I head the Science and Technology Department at the university. And we are absolutely delighted that you're able to join us in this special evening to the inaugural lecture of Professor Peter Cochrane. Peter is one of the most respected technology gurus in the world. He is an engineer, an entrepreneur, an angel investor, a troubleshooter, problem solver, and a consultant. Peter spends most of his time advising governments and businesses on science and technology and innovation matters, and travels the globe giving public talks. Come to think of it, Peter's air miles now are near enough to buy him his own Boeing 747. Peter's work spanned across quite a number of sectors. He spent vast amounts of his time and energy in the telecommunication sectors, but he worked in the retail sector, healthcare sector, transport, as well as defense and security. His hands-on expertise spans across digital systems, electronic systems, artificial intelligence, and general computing and adaptive systems. His focus and love for the technical matters never blinkered him into just the technology. He always placed focus and attention on the human factors and human-computer interactions, and always valued user experience. As a matter of fact, Peter's work in the human factors and user experience, where decades before this has been coined as a known term for the public. Peter's career journey is really interesting. It is an example of what hard work and dedication and perseverance can achieve. Peter left school early and joined the workforce of British Telecom as a telecommunication lineman. He joined a night school to further his education. Not only he finished his night school, he went on and earned a bachelor degree, a master's degree, a Doctor of Philosophy degree, and the notoriously difficult Doctor of Science degree, in addition to a bundle of other earned and honorary degrees. Come to think of it, the number of degrees that Peter holds are more than the degrees in my thermometers. So Peter, if that was a goal, you've certainly achieved it. Peter's career progressed from a startup as a line telecommunication man, going through the ranks to lead the research at BT, to become their head of research and chief technology officer, leading BT at a time where innovation that transformed the world of digital telecommunication has taken place at the time. Peter's work has been recognized by so many awards. Just to name a few, he has been awarded Order of the British Empire. He's been awarded the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers Millennium Medal. For people like me in that field, that is an aspiration that I'm not sure I would be able to achieve in my life, but fingers crossed. And he's been given the Queen's Award for Innovation for his pioneering work in putting the Transatlantic Ocean 8 cable, the first cable in the world that used fiber optics technology. This particular cable was a changing factor in how the world telecommunicated. We've moved away from a time where a second of overseas telecommunication costed an arm and a length into affordable telecommunication as we know it today. Peter has not been far from education. He spends parts of his time working with academics and working with students, parting with his knowledge with us. And indeed, Peter was awarded the UK's first chair of the public understanding of science by the University of Bristol. When he's not working, Peter loves to fly fish, walk, cycle, and canoe. He loves to listen to music, and while listening to music, he loves thinking about solving real hard problems. On a personal note, back in Egypt in the 1990s, I was a young telecommunications engineer. and a slim one as well. My wife will testify to this. And I was involved in designing telecom systems that were acknowledged as innovative and nice. The fact of the matter is, many of the technologies that I have used in my work were developed by Peter and his teams. And at that time, there was no chance in my mind, not in a million years, that I will have an opportunity to actually meet Peter Cochrane in person and have the opportunity to have coffee and chat with him. I'm grateful for the University of Suffolk for so many things that offered me. Among these is the opportunity not just to have a chat to Peter, but to work very closely with him in his capacity as our visiting professor to help us build the international excellence of our science and technology offer to the region, to work hand in hand with us in equipping our region young talents with the skills that they need to build the future, and to support all our efforts in working with the business community and innovation to make Suffolk one of the most thriving and world-leading areas and regions in digital economy and knowledge-based economy. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I present Professor Peter Cochrane.
Thank you, sir. I'm also a husband and a father, and I wash pots and dig the garden and all that kind of stuff. And one of my unusual hobbies is seeing what I can get through airport security with. And I've managed to get through with full electrical toolkits and all kinds of stuff, and only very occasionally do I get caught. But it's kind of a fun hobby. So if I have a quality at all, it's to perhaps think differently and ask dumb questions. Here is a big problem for us. Before the Reformation, there was science and there was art. But the division was extremely fine, and people flipped between the two. Now, if you say to somebody, what do you do, and they say a physicist, you say, well, what kind of physicist is that? Is that a molecular physicist, or you're in cosmology? What is it you do? And we have focused people down through soda straws, and everybody's looking at the world like this. I have been down a soda straw. It was called doing a PhD, and when I finished my PhD, I knew an infinite amount about nothing. Now, I know nothing about an infinite amount. And so I've become like a thin sheet of ice across the whole of human activity. And if I've retained a skill, it has been to dig down, ask dumb questions, and understand. So I'm going to try and impart some of the challenges we face and some of the solutions, and I can tell you for certain there are many PhDs in the audience. At the same time, there are many lay people in the audience, and this is going to provoke all of you. And so afterwards, when I finish, we're going to have a discussion, and then there's going to be drinks out there, and the offer I make you is that forevermore, if you go onto my homepage and you find my email, and you email me and say, you know, I saw you give a lecture a week ago, an hour ago, 10 years ago, and I didn't quite get this, can you explain? I will be back. I will respond. Okay, so this is the world that we all came from. You know, things were sort of connected, they were kind of slow, and it was a nice steady place, and this is what's happened to it. It's moving very, very quickly, and we communicate and we cluster and we do stuff in a way that we've never been able to do before. And I have to put my hand up and say, I was a part with my team of putting that world together with hundreds of thousands of other people across the planet. It has changed everything, and it is changing society, and we have to think about this carefully. And so this is where we are, and this is what we know for sure. We're denuding this planet of raw materials. We're seeing the temperature of the planet rise slowly. Do we fully understand this? No. Do we have models that are absolutely rock solid certain? No. But we do know that we're kind of sleepwalking into some fairly horrendous problems. At the very least, we should exert some caution in the stuff we do. But I'm going to put it to you that there are several things. We cannot go backwards. We cannot go back to some ideal of basket weaving and ploughing the fields with a horse, not without killing large numbers of people. We have over 7 billion people who are utterly dependent on technology. Switch off the technology, we'll die, period. And so you have to ask yourself the question, where would you like to go back to? Before X-rays, before scanners, before modern medicine? Where would you like to be in history? Personally, I can't think of a better place to be than tomorrow. That's where I want to be, because I can see things that are coming that are going to be really quite transformative. So technology only goes one way, and we can't back up, and it's as simple as that. What we know for sure is if we take our existing industries and we keep polishing them and we keep making them more efficient, it doesn't solve the problem. It only puts off the day of catastrophe. It only puts off the day of some awful cataclysm. We've got to do something new. And so I'm going to suggest to you that we've got to have some grand design. And the grand design is we've got to stop producing more and more for the few, and we've got to start supplying sufficient for the many. Because without doing that, we will not achieve any kind of global stability, and we will not achieve an equitable standard of living. So there are key technologies I think we have to embrace, and they go like this. The biotech, nanotech, the robotics, the artificial intelligence, and the network are absolutely key. The future is going to be about new material technologies, some of which I'm going to show you. And they really do make quite a big difference to the way we look at the world. Converse to what is happening out there, we cannot survive without the free movement of people and globalization. I'll give you an example. The last 450,000 people employed in the UK were immigrants. The next 50,000 will be immigrants. We have right now 200,000 vacancies for data analysts in the UK and not a single data analyst coming out of our universities. How are we going to keep the UK GDP up above the water and expanding without that capability? It's fundamentally impossible. So all of this talk about going back is just very slightly ridiculous. It can't be done. The people who are sitting waiting for a steel mill to be opened at the end of their village or something are in for a bad surprise. It's not coming any day soon. So here is, in my view, one of the biggest difficulties we have. This meatware in which we all live has evolved to cope with a slow-moving, analog, relatively linear world. A, B, C. You do something today, you do the same thing tomorrow, the outcome is more or less the same. In the world that we've built, that is no longer true. And a lot of our instincts and a lot of our knee-jerk reactions and a lot of our experience turn out to be wrong very, very rapidly. So there are many examples, and this one I sometimes give. I'll risk it tonight, but all you married gentlemen will understand this fully. You say something to your wife today and it's a good idea. You say the same thing in a week's time and it turns out to be a bad idea. That's an example of a nonlinear system. So for those of you with a mathematical bent, let me explain some more. When we say nonlinear, I don't mean something like x squared or e to the x or something like that. I mean something that is complex and nonlinear in that it has memory. You do something today, it remembers, and that changes the whole system dynamic. So as you repeatedly do something, the outcome changes every time. And it can be a small amount, or it can be massively unrecognizable amount. And that makes it very difficult for us. So there are lots and lots of simple solutions to complex problems. The snag is they're all wrong. Really dangerously wrong. So here's an example of why we've got a bit of a problem. The single issue thinkers who might say, oh, we're going to look at care, and we'll look at care alone, or we're going to look at security and look at security alone, or trade or whatever, and they look at one item or another. Every one of these items is linked. And so no one has a model of our society, computer model, not the Treasury, not anyone, that adequately describes what happens if you spend less money on education. So the first thing that happens is, employment creeps up a bit, crime goes up, and you start to bring in more immigrants, and the GDP goes down. Now you've not got enough money to spend on the health service, and so on. And that kind of thinking is not abroad in political circles, and there are not people out there who seem all that capable. So have we got any economists in the room? Great. There aren't any. So here's an observation. And now and again, we observe some pattern, we form a little law, it gets published, and somebody gets a Nobel Prize. The economists are the only people I know who get Nobel Prizes for stuff that doesn't work. I mean, it seriously does not work. You can cite many, many things. Look at the basics. First of all, the economies are based on such an old idea that there is an infinite amount of material, there's a finite market, and there's a linear channel between the two, and none of that is true. So let's just push this along a little further. This is what we've got. We've got a lot of data. What we haven't got is big understanding. That's what we need, and that's what we're striving for. And I'm going to put it to you that the human brain is fundamentally incapable of understanding and solving the problems that we now face. And we need several partners. So even when I was in British Telecom, and I had a brilliant team, 1,000 strong, some of the best minds on the planet, I recruited every colour, creed, gender, discipline, experience I could get my hands on, and I wanted at least another one, and it was machine. We needed the AI to help us deal with some of the problems, and it wasn't ready then. So let's just look at truth and wisdom. Everybody knows that helicopters can't fly upside down. It's been truth for a long time. Well, it isn't anymore. Now they can. A lot of the things that we take to be true turn out to be very transitory. The Earth was flat. Well, originally it was, the ancients thought it was a sphere, and then it became flat in ignorance, and then it became a sphere again, and then it became an oblate sphere, and then it became a dynamic oblate sphere, and that's the best we've got now. And so a lot of the truths are actually migrating. So what I'm going to do now for the rest of the time is I'm going to give you some exemplars of technologies and the implications across a broad front. And I can tell you now that predicting technology is so easy, because 5 years out, everything you're going to buy in the next 5 years, I can take you to a laboratory to see it, play with it, touch it. It all exists. If you go out 10 years, more than 50% of it exists. The rest of it is a science project. The real challenge is what the heck people will do with it. When will they accept it? A good example is cards. You've not been able to get a credit card in Korea for the last 13 years, unless you're leaving the country. And then when you come into a backward place like Europe, you get a card. But all of their payments are done on mobile phones. So what we've got with Apple and other people hoorahing about electronic payments, other countries have had for a long time, because that society accepted it and this one didn't. And it takes a while. Sometimes I wonder if we have to wait for a generation to die before things move on. But it's sort of interesting, the way different societies across the planet accept and go with the technology or not. Those of you who've read anything of these two authors would know they were a little bit fatalistic, inwardly looking. And I think it's really kind of amusing. One, they'd be joyous at all the cameras in the street and Big Brother is watching you. But they'd be amazed that we buy and install our own cameras and microphones, and then we get rather upset when no one's watching us. And we have now got a society of little brother. We watch each other. And we share information in a way that would have horrified these guys. And when you listen to them talk, and if you go on YouTube, there are quite a few interviews of them on radio, they were very sort of down on the way things were going. And it turned out the value in us all sharing is enormous compared to the risk of keeping it all protected. They were wrong, big time. So there are so many technologies that are going to impact. A lot of them you will recognize, a lot of them you will be involved in, all of them you are subject to, and these dictate your future. And there are quite a few more I've not got on here, but these are some of the biggest. So when I go to London and the BBC come up to Suffolk and they say, come and have a look at my small laboratory and what we're doing, and they say, you know, take us to our really high-tech place. They're amazed when I take them to a local farm. The local farm is one of the most amazingly technologically advanced places you can go. This is a driverless machine. They're all driverless machines. Sure, there are human beings up there, but they are computer controlled because people can't drive with that accuracy and that efficiency. Simple as that. And if you're going to feed the population, this is the way you have to do it. You can't do it with a man and a horse. So this is an aircraft plant. People don't build aircraft anymore, they assemble them. The bits and pieces come from all over the world. People like Boeing are systems integrators. They put the stuff together. What they've got is the design, the jigs and fixtures. But I have to tell you that no single human being fully understands how a jet engine works. The guys who pull the blades from a single crystal are very, very specialized, unique. The guys who deal with the combustion have got unique knowledge and capability. The materials specialists, indeed, involved are phenomenal. So when Concorde was put together, the thrust per engine was 60,000 pounds per square inch. The RB211 now stands at 120,000 pounds per square inch, and they pump oil through the blades to stop them melting because they're way above the melt temperature. And those of you with any physics background will know there are only two things that dictate the energy output from any engine, and that's the lowest temperature and the top end temperature. And if you're going to get more out of a given volume, that's what you have to do. So I was a circuit designer, and then I was a chip designer, and there are a few people here from BT, and they will remember we used to employ a lot of ladies doing what this robot is doing up top. All of you who've got a mobile phone or some electronic device can rest assured that none of the circuits were designed by a human being because they can't do it anymore. None of the chips were put together by human beings because they can't do it anymore. Can't even see them, let alone do anything like this kind of speed. Last year, we shipped 1.6 billion mobile phones. And I don't mean simple mobile phones, I mean very powerful computing engines. My mobile phone in my pocket right now has got more computing power than was on this planet in 1969. That is exponential growth. It means that collectively we've got the world's biggest supercomputer if we connect them together. We've never been so capable and able. And so now to another interesting press item. AI is coming, robots are coming, we're all out of a job. Rubbish. We are going to need so many people. Let's just get clear what it is that robots do and what it is that people do. Robots and AI are absolutely brilliant at the known, the understood, the repetitive and the boring, and they do it with phenomenal accuracy. They do not get tired, they do not make mistakes. What people do very poorly, but sufficiently well, is deal with surprises. They deal with real-time things that pop up, and we are good enough, and then we train up the machines and we get better solutions. So on that production line, the human being is doing stuff that the robot cannot. Now, if the pundits were right and we were all going to put out of work, how come we've got 4.6% unemployment in the US and the UK? And now tell me if you can find a plumber, a gardener, an electrician, a builder, a decorator. We are so desperately short of people. Industry is screaming for good graduates. Weirdly, in the United States, good graduates are given a green card to work there. In the UK, we turn them away. They get a PhD from a university, and we do not let them have a job in the UK. How weird is that? So, robotics, we tend to think this is a robot warehouse, there's no one in evidence, but there's a lot more happening. We've got robots right down to the scale where up on this top right, we have now got them being experimentally injected into the bloodstream to swim along and deliver drugs to a given point. This morning it was revealed that the US Air Force from a fighter aircraft with a pod released over 300 micro drones into the atmosphere over a target. I'll let your imagination work on that, but you can imagine what these things are actually about. So complexity rules, and I want to coin this in the terms of bits and atoms. Here is the United States. These are aircraft flying over to Europe. Europe is away. This is the European activity. There is the electronic activity of the UK. The network is woken up. Social network is above. And that is the world I came from as a young man, of electromechanical switching and dial telephones. And you could have any telephone color you like, as long as it was black. The thinking of that top right box does not fit anywhere in the rest of the boxes. It's dangerous. It can't possibly deal with this level of complexity. I want to mention emergent behaviors. As an engineer, we are very slightly paranoid about things going wrong, and we love to be able to characterize everything and say with certainty what the system is going to do, how it's going to perform. But increasingly, we're building systems, watching them do stuff, and then take us by surprise. If you permit me one profanity, it is what the Americans call a holy shit moment, where a system hurtles off in a direction you didn't expect. And hopefully, you've got it bounded and it will behave. And occasionally, there is a tragedy. But there always was with linear systems anyway, but we are struggling a lot of the time to characterize the systems that we're building. So what comes next? Most of the people you're now going to see, I have met and talked with, including Elon Musk, who I've met 2 or 3 times. This guy made his money out of the internet. This is Tesla. The reason he set up Tesla was to fund his pet project, which is SpaceX. He wants to get a man way, way out into space. So that's where his money comes from. And that is a stunning development. And those of you that balk against self-driving cars, and by the way, as soon as one is in my price bracket, I'm having one. I have no wish to drive anything anymore. Watch this. So here is a Tesla. It's on an autobahn, and it spots something happening with the traffic, sounds an alarm to alert the driver who's sat there having a coffee or whatever, and stops the car with 3 car lengths to go. So you have to think of the time it takes you to recognize something's happening and the time for you to put your foot down on the brake pedal and stop the car. This is about 10 times faster. The chances are you would have been a part of that crash. One, you've got to be concentrating intensely, and there's about 20 milliseconds of transit time between your eye and your brain. There's 100, 200 milliseconds of time to process the information, and then you need something like 150 milliseconds for your right foot to jump onto the brake pedal, and that is sufficient. Meanwhile, this is what the Chinese are doing.
EHang 184 is the safest, smartest, and eco-friendly low-altitude autonomous aerial vehicle aiming on providing medium-short distance transportation solution. Early in 2013, EHang started a disruptive and revolutionary plan of making this new generation of autonomous vehicle. This vehicle is set to match.
It's obviously a quadricopter, but the story is an interesting one because the father and the son of the company were both killed outright in a fixed-wing aircraft crash, and their team set up this company and trying to perfect this. If they do, it changes the nature of
green. Yeah. Most people don't eat fresh lettuce because it comes from California and takes 3 to 5 days to get to the store. This is our whole lettuce tower, and the way we plant this is we plant it specifically to a custom order. And so a customer will come in, place an order, tell us when they want these to be harvested, and then every week after the first growth cycle, this crop comes right. So if you look up in here, you'll see plants at different stages of development.
What's the advantage of using a vertical farm as opposed to just a regular farm?
Well, the obvious is a horizontal farm only gets one level. Here you can see we can grow up. So we get much more density per square foot than you do in a field farm. Second, we can harvest daily here. We get about 26 harvests per tub, where a field farm will only get you maybe 1, 2, or 3. Also, a field farm, you could lose your whole crop if you have drought or you have inclement weather.
So some non-obvious things in there. I did some work for Philips, and Philips did all the lighting. It's all LED lighting. Why is it that peculiar hue? Because that is the light, part of the light spectrums that lettuce require. So why spend our energy on white light when you can tune the energy to meet the requirements of the lettuce? The other killer here is you can build these vertical food farms in the middle of a city and get rid of the transport costs of shipping food all over the place. So when you look towards the future, you have to say, well, I think this has got a high probability that it's going to work. The next one I'm going to show you, I don't think it's got such a high probability, but it's a cool idea. So this goes back to China and India, where people put one seed in at a time. It's a team of robots that do it, and they drill a hole, put a seed in, give it a squirt of fertilizer, water it, then they go around the fields doing the weeding and all that kind of stuff. And it, as a prototype, it actually works. Has it got legs? I don't know. I suspect that the vertical farms will win. But it's sort of an interesting way of looking at the problem and tackling it. This is hydrophobic coatings. If you've not seen this, I'm going to get all my grandchildren coated in this stuff. My wife says, oh, I need all my ties coating in it because I'll spill stuff down them. Quite remarkable. This has interesting impact on things like boats, buildings, glass on buildings, whatever you care to think of. It changes the game. So here is something. I can't demonstrate all of this, but this is my future vehicle. First of all, I never want to clean it again. I'll have it hydrophobically coated, so water and muck just slide off. I'll have the panels printed out of plastic rather than stamped out of metal, so it won't rust. It's easy to fix. I'll have the plastics programmable for color. So I can have a red car in the morning, my wife can have a green car in the afternoon, or whatever. And I'll have it self-repairing to a point. So when I, down at the supermarket, and I scrape it on something and I've got a scratch down the side, it will have healed by the time I've got it home and stood it into the garage for half a day, and I don't have to fess up to my wife that I scratched the car. Now, what is interesting here is that all of these facilities individually have been demonstrated. So this is not a science project. We have plastics that are batteries. So instead of having a thumping lump of material in the middle of the vehicle somewhere, the battery, the whole shell of the vehicle becomes a battery. This is an engineering project. We've got all of those facilities independently, but we've got to integrate them together. That is the engineering challenge. That's the real bug. So now this is another one to think about. This is a printed wheel and a printed tire. So it's not a massive, necessarily a massive plant somewhere doing this. So you have to think like this. It's cheaper to ship powder than it is to ship the complete product. So you have to think ahead and say, well, I'll go down to the tire center, and instead of having hundreds of tires on shelves, they've got printing machines and they've got powder. They look at your wheel and they say, well, if you come back tomorrow, we'll have it printed, or come back in 2 days, we'll have it printed. They will print you the wheel, complete with a tire. It's no longer pneumatic. And you can guess the reason why these were developed. The military don't like punctures. And so what is interesting is the amount of damage you can do to that wheel by putting bullets through the spokes. And it still works. Even with about 30 or 40% of the wheel inner damaged, it still keeps going. You may or may not have noticed, but if you're on an A380 or a 777, wings really do flap a lot. I mean, an incredible amount. They go up several meters up and down, and it's very bouncy. And the reason are they're plastic wings. In fact, they're composite wings, and they're printed. And they're carbon fiber. And the way they're printed is quite remarkable. The threads of carbon fiber are laid non-stop, 24 hours a day, to build up this composite wing. And the real critical thing here is that you get perfection of form, because if you don't, and it ruptures, you get a catastrophic failure really very quickly. In a way that you perhaps don't get with metals. So these composite wings are phenomenal performance, but take some pretty miraculous manufacturing. This is the world's first printed lung. Now, this is tricky because it's a combination of printing and stem cells, and no one understands how stem cells work. But the medics and the people working in biology are gradually becoming engineers. They have the same maxim as engineers. Just because we don't understand something doesn't mean to say we can't exploit it. And so there are a whole host of these things you can find, but I've seen spinal vertebrae fitted into rats, and they finish up with a better spinal assembly than they were born with. They're not available to humans yet. So all of this stuff is happening. This is the strongest material known to man. It's graphene, and the trick that's being pulled here is to take a two-dimensional sheet of graphene. A graphene sheet is 1 atom thick and like a net, and you can put a cat in this net, and it will hold the weight of a cat. And this is a 1 atom thick sheet. Phenomenal material. And getting it into a 3D form has been a real killer. But what they've got now is something that's of far greater resilience than steel, a lot less dense, and hugely stronger. It's a real game changer. And this is how the graphene sheet looks. And it is a phenomenal piece of bioengineering. This guy I've met, the idea that you're about to see came out of MIT, where I used to have an office years ago. And all they've done is taken a standard camera. And by the way, you can download this software. They've taken a standard camera and they've done two things. They've amplified the movement information and they've amplified the color information. This has phenomenal implications for medicine and for security. Just watch.
When we look at this video of Steve here, it appears to us like a static picture. But once we look at this video through our new special microscope, suddenly we see a completely different image. What you see here are small changes in the color of Steve's skin magnified 100 times so that they become visible. We can actually see a human pulse. We can see how fast Steve's heart is beating, but we can also see the actual way that the blood flows in his face. And we can do that not just to visualize the pulse, but also to actually recover our heart rates and measure our heart rates. And we can do it with regular cameras and without touching the patients. So here you see the pulse and heart rate we extracted for a neonatal baby from a video we took with a regular DSLR camera. And the heart rate measurement we get is as accurate as the one you'd get with a standard monitor in a hospital. And it doesn't even have to be a video we record.
This one is quite cute.
Here's a side-by-side comparison. So again, in the source video, in the original video, there's not too much we can see. But once we magnify the motions, the breathing becomes much more visible. And it turns out there's a lot of phenomena we can reveal and magnify with our new motion microscope. We can see how our veins and arteries are pulsing in our body.
If the implications are not absolutely glaring at you, imagine walking into your doctor's surgery, and by the time you get in there and sit down, he knows what your pulse rate is, he knows what your temperature is, and he knows that your blood dispersion is irregular, for starters. If you're walking through Heathrow Airport, the question to ask is, why is that guy over there got a pulse of 160 and he's sweating? So there are many, many uses for this. I've not put it in, but I got a wonderful video where a husband has taken a video of his pregnant wife, and the baby's moving around. It's all I can say is it's a little bit like Alien. It really is. And so it's interesting. But you can get this and you can use it. This one, I'm waiting to arrive at my home any day. And the reason is, for some reason, I've started to pick up all kinds of allergies as I've got older. So I've become celiac. I'm really sensitive, in a bad way, to any kind of gluten. I'm not very good with lactose. I spend all my days reading labels. And here is a scanner. And if you go to the local hospital, the scanners are about 1 to 3 million. They take up anything up to a room or a good corner of a lab. These guys have got one onto a USB stick. So has anybody here used a spectrophotometer? Let me just tell you the simple idea. It's a simple idea, but it's difficult to engineer. You take a material and you either set fire to it or you hit it with a laser very hard and you watch the spectrum come off. As the spectrum comes off, you put it through a laser and the intensity of the light is measured across the spectrum, and that tells you the atomic structure. That's how easy it is. Not. It's a dog to make, and you usually have to have a maintenance crew. And so I saw this and I saw the team, and I put an order in immediately, almost not caring how much it was. You know, this is going to be a life changer. So what I want you to think about as you watch the movie is, you're not feeling very well, you get a urine sample, you do a diagnosis of your own urine sample or saliva or anything else coming out of your body. You go to the doctor with a ready-made analysis. Today you'll go to your doctor, they'll take samples, they go off to a lab, a week later, samples come back, then they start treating you. In that 1 week, you've got a lot worse. So this is an immediate turnaround. It changes the nature of how we look after people.
Imagine if there was a way to know the chemical makeup of everything you come in contact with. The applications are endless.
Sire uses this tiny optical sensor called a spectrometer, which absorbs light reflected back from an object and breaks it down into a spectrum. The spectrum is then sent to our cloud for analysis, and our algorithms send back the result to your phone in real time.
Spectrometers are used today in labs around the world, but they're too large and expensive for everyday use.
To fulfill our vision, we need to make a tiny spectrometer that can be mass-produced at low cost.
We recruited an amazing R&D team that redesigned the sensor from the ground up, using low-cost optics and advanced signal processing algorithms.
It took us 3 years and the effort of many talented engineers to create our sensor. We now have a working product and several applications with many more to come.
When you back this project and order your own style, you get apps for scanning food, medicine, and plants. With these apps, you can begin exploring the world around you. With any app, the more you scan, the more Sayo learns about the things you really want to know.
Sayo is our latest design.
3 years, that was the sale pitch. It's actually year 5, but I'm patient. This surgeon, I got to meet, I got to know. He has no clue what he's doing. But what he's doing is injecting gold wires into the human brain, putting pulses in, and he's curing the tremor. So this is a world-class violinist. His whole career is destroyed. And this surgeon puts pulses into his brain, kills the tremor. They embed a pulse generator in his chest cavity, and he's now back on the stage. And this is quite phenomenal. This is the first time I've ever heard applause in a hospital operating theatre.
This might be the end of my career.
In hopes of finding treatment that could save his career, Roger went to Mayo Clinic.
So we're inserting the DBS electrode now.
Dr. Kendall Lee and a team of experts performed what's called deep brain stimulation. And during the entire procedure, Roger was awake, ready to play his violin.
Can you play a song for us?
Mayo engineers designed a device that measures Roger's tremor. While Roger plays, Dr. Lee inserts electrodes into Roger's brain and guides them to the site where the tremor originates. Once there, the electrodes fire electrical signals to hopefully stop the tremor. There was no guarantee it would work. You see, Roger's tremor is relatively minor, and he wants 100% relief. Thankfully, it did work.
So all the clock functions of the human brain are right down here at the top of the spinal cord. And if you lose a clock function and you look at the brain activity, it's like watching a lightning storm. The brain is firing haphazardly. So effectively what they've done is replaced the clock function and just made the brain function synchronize, and they've managed to stop that problem. And it is quite phenomenal. You might need a slightly strong stomach for this. So this is a really moving story. This is an American policeman. He goes to a bonfire, and some idiot throws on a gallon of gasoline onto the fire. It blows back, and this is how he looked over a good part of his body. I don't think the burn was phenomenally deep. But after the skin is off, it looks like that. And so a surgeon cooked up some of his stem cells, put them into, I kid you not, a paint spray gun, and sprayed the patient with them. The result is phenomenal. And there's a little symbol down in the bottom. This is a National Geographic report, so it's not a spoof. What I have seen is other burn victims where it's gone much further into the subcutaneous fat, and the result is not as good. But you know, if you want to have really upsetting experiences, go to the hospital, go to the burns unit, or go to the cancer ward and see facial cancer and those kinds of things. They're pretty mortifying, but this is remarkable. So this is actually a later version of the gun that he produced, and it's literally a bit of compressed air and just spray it on the body. Oops, sorry, finger trouble. Let me go back.
This is what it looked like 4 days after it was sprayed with his own stem cells.
They did it on a Friday, and my follow-up was that Monday, and the burn unit said it was healed, completely healed.
That's pretty unbelievable, but I don't believe the depth was all that great, and the pictures were probably an exaggeration of the true damage. But that is a phenomenal result. If you go on the net and you have a look, there are 1 or 2 people with facial burns, and the result is actually quite staggering compared to this nightmare of continual skin grafts that people have to have for many, many years. But again, people don't understand how it's working. So this is something I've worked on a lot. I created a mathematical formula to describe what intelligence was. It caused no end of grief in terms of how people balk. There doesn't seem to be much that enrages people much more than saying a machine is smarter than them. So let's just get to the social bit of this. We watch TV and we assign great intelligence to people who can answer lots of questions on a topic. That is not a measure of intelligence. That is a measure of memory. My laptop can do that, and it's not all that intelligent. Machines can do it better, it turns out. So what has happened is, throughout my life, it's, you know, computers will never play drafts. They will never beat a grandmaster at chess. They'll never play Go. They'll never. They've done all that. And each one of these categories, they are now far superior to a human being. We cannot win. So now on comprehension, this is really interesting, because in general knowledge, they outgunned us in 2011. In medical diagnosis, they outgunned us in 2012. Electronic circuit design, they outgunned us much earlier. And they do right now the majority.
You might like. Elton John.
That's an AI demonstration that's supposed to be quiet. Alexa, stop. Thank you. So without the artificial intelligence, we cannot decode the genome or the protein. The protein problem, the protein folding problem, is like origami on afterburners. It's at least 1,000 times computationally more complex than the genome. We can't crack it. Let me give you a perspective. All the work of Crick and Watson to come up with a double helix can be done by a modern machine in much less than 15 minutes. And it took them years. The robots and the AI decode the genome, not human beings. For the protein stack, we need colossal computing power, and progress is being made. And I'm going to give you a guess now, and I may be dead or alive when this is proven true or false. But my guess is that cancer is a communication problem between genome and protein. And that problem is at least 1,000 times more complicated than the protein stack decode. So we can only solve these problems with increased computational power. Here is the bane of my life. The half-life of information is getting shorter. The useful of what I know is getting tricky. So let's put this in context. Tomorrow morning, you go to your doctor, you find it's a brand new male or female doctor. They sit there, you find that they graduated last week. And as you look at them, you say, you know what, 50% of everything you were taught and understood is now wrong. And you're going to diagnose on me. And many professions are in this kind of relentless cycle. So I now have a confession. I will no longer read another book the rest of my life. I cannot afford to waste 5 hours of my time on a book. A new book is published every 13 seconds. Which one should I read? A professional report is published every 13 milliseconds. How do I read it? Something interesting on the internet pops up every 13 microseconds. We can't cope with this. So I've sort of put my arms around technology, and this one is the ultimate barrister. So this is a machine, Watson. It has taken 20 million texts, analyzed them, sifted them down to less than 3 million, and like a barrister, it gives you a pro and con argument.
You have selected the topic. The sale of violent video games to minors should be banned. I would like to raise the following points in support of the topic. Exposure to violent video games results in increased physiological arousal, aggression-related thoughts and feelings, as well as decreased prosocial behavior. In addition, these violent games or lyrics actually cause adolescents to commit acts of real-life aggression. Finally, violent video games can increase children's aggression. On the other hand, I would like to note the following claims that oppose the topic. Violence in video games is not causally linked with aggressive tendencies. In addition, most children who play violent games do not have problems. Finally, video game play is part of an adolescent boy's normal social setting.
There you go. The Lord Chief Justice is alarmed because the caseload is going forward and not going backwards. They can't stabilize it. They're being outgunned, and they need electronic barristers, AI barristers, to cope with the caseload. So, United States, IBM Watson, being installed in CVS Pharmacy, biggest pharmacy chain in the US. You walk in, you pay your $10, you talk to Watson, tell it what's wrong with it, and there's a diagnosis, and then you go off to see the pharmacist and you get your drugs. Since Obamacare, more or less everybody's had access to healthcare, but if it's repealed, 40 million Americans will have no recourse to primary healthcare, and they'll be back where they started. And this is literally a lifesaver. This terrifies the politicians when I tell them, but a truth engine is coming. A truth engine is coming. I saw a wonderful cartoon the other day. It was, let's see, George Washington, I cannot tell a lie. And then it was Tricky Dicky, I always tell a lie. And then it was the incumbent president, and the caption was, I can't tell the difference. And actually finding the truth is actually quite tough, and we need this. So I'm going to give just a couple more examples of AI at work and how it works, and then we're going to break and have a discussion, and we've got drinks out there and all that kind of stuff. So here's the first one.
To understand handwriting or drawings, you don't just look at what the person drew, you look at how they actually drew it. Which strokes did they make first? Which direction did they draw them in? You train the computer on millions of characters from hundreds of languages, and over time, it learns whether you wrote look or whether you wrote book.
Now, there's something else in here as well. We have the advantage. Let me demonstrate it this way. Let us pray. So if we're in church, we know it is let us pray. If we're in the kitchen, we know it is lettuce spray. And if we're in the garden, we know that it is let us spray. Now the machines, this one that I have here, has no visual. When it gets visual and it can contextualize the question, it increases the chance of getting the recognition right and making sense of the question at hand. So this is quite remarkable. You can go and play this, and this is the beauty of this. If you go on the net, go onto this website and have a play with it and draw really crap pictures and tell it what you're drawing, the machine gets smarter. It's learning from a human being. So this is very much like a baby. AI is like a baby. You teach the baby and teach the baby, and gradually the baby starts to learn on its own, and then the baby grows up and starts to teach you. That's what's actually happening. But this is really cool. On several of these objects, I've seen people stumble and they can't decide what they are, but just watch.
I see leg, or matches, or popsicle, or lollipop. Oh, I know, it's tennis racket. Oh, I know, it's Sears. I see keyboard, or pillow, or mug. Oh, I know, it's a. I see leg. I see broom, or golf club, or shovel, or wine bottle. I see line. Oh, I know, it's knee. I see circle, or bracelet, or pillow, or cookie. I have no clue what you're drawing. I see stove. I have no clue what you're drawing. Oh, I know. It's soccer ball.
It's quite incredible. And all it's done is learn from stuff that the people have put in. Really quite amazing. So, coming to a close, during my lifetime, all these jobs have gone. In some of the rest of my lifetime, and a lot of yours, and especially the young people, all these jobs will disappear. They will all go. But there are even more to come, and they are challenging, and they will require more people. And we have to start thinking. There is an alarming factoid. I go to universities throughout the West, no matter where I go, and at BSc level, you will find indigenous students. At master's degree level, you find a few indigenous students. At PhD level, you find no indigenous students. What the heck is happening to our society that actually makes that happen? Because when I go to the East, and my wife keeps saying to me, "Go East, old man," the converse is true. The students are fighting to get into university. Getting a PhD is like gold, and it's a great honor. And meantime, across the West, we celebrate fools and make celebrities out of complete idiots. Isn't it really quite strange? This is phenomenally damaging. Where are we going to get our skilled people from? There is nothing wrong with the material. I can assure you that the young people we have are just as bright, just as smart as anyone else in any other generation. And yet, the society does not encourage or reward them for that ever. So what is now happening is something quite remarkable. And one of the reasons I've decided to come and help at this university is we've got to change the nature of education. Having a bunch of tickets and awards and all that stuff doesn't mean diddly squat if you can't solve problems. It really does not. And so there are whole companies in the valley, Silicon Valley, who look for college dropouts. I mean, Steve Jobs never completed a course in his life. Some of the most brilliant engineers and scientists I have worked with have got no qualifications. And that's not to say that you don't need them, but there are exceptional people who should not be pushed aside because they don't fit the model. But what we've actually got to do is change that model, and that's one of the reasons I'm going to be here. So we can resist this stuff, or we can adapt. And you know, evolution is really about the survival of the most adaptable. You either go with it, or metaphorically, you die. Period. That's it. And that's what we have to do. I'll just kill that. So I just got a little demonstration. How many people can remember their mathematical days at school and the number pi? And some of you will have done the number e, and they're transcendental numbers. They don't stop. So let's see if this works. Alexa, can you tell me the value of pi?
The approximate value of pi is 3.141592653589793327950288419717.
Alexa, stop. Alexa, can you rap for me?
My name is Alexa, and I'm here to say, I'm the baddest AI in the cloud today. Your responses are fast, but mine are faster. Sucker speech engines, they call me master.
So, curiously now, I talk to my computer, I talk to my car, and now I've started talking to my kitchen. My kids think it's wacky. Half our children are technophobes, the other half are technophiles, and my wife and I, who's in here this evening, pride ourselves on keeping ahead of the kids. How can we outrage them next? And so, not many, a couple of years ago, we posted a movie on Facebook, and we didn't tell them what we'd done, but we'd been skydiving in a wind tunnel, and so suddenly this pops up, and we get these frantic emails, what are you doing at your age? having fun. So, you know, it's kind of fun. So we experiment all the time. And the question is that useful? It has got some incredible qualities, and one of them is you'll be having a conversation. I'll say, you know, I've got a hole in my sock, and she pipes up out of the blue, would you like me to order some socks? And you can see that as a threat or as an opportunity. As a man who doesn't like sort of shopping for socks, it's okay. So this presentation, and lots of presentations like it, are on cochrane.org.uk. I think there's 65 presentations, there are movies, there's about 1,200 written papers and stuff that I've done in my life. And then the offer is, if you, as I often do, go to a lecture and you think, that was okay, I understood that, and then about a day later you think, no, I didn't. I make you this open offer, email me, I will be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. And answers, if anyone would like to ask a question. While you're thinking about that, I have something to tell you, because I walked in here yesterday to a team of students that were working in the area of broadcasting and audio-visual who had never done a gig. And I have to say, I've worked with them all day to get all the stuff to work. And so you have just applauded me, but believe me, the heroes of getting all this kit together are at the two extremities of the room, and they've done a sterling job. Normally people just criticize AV guys because it's always a mess. That was perfect. That's not half bad for the first time they ever did it. And I got to buy a new pair of trousers. Okay. So, sir, question. I think we've got a microphone here, and by the way, this lot's being webcast, so...
AI is clearly going to be a very important part of these futures. Yeah. What do you say is the most important platform for AI, the most likely to take us where we want to go? Rule-based symbol systems or neural nets?
That's a really good question, and the answer really is, I don't know, and I don't think it's neural networks. I worked on neural networks with several people in here 20-odd years ago. We did remarkable things. Now, what bugs me is we've got a huge number of people trying to replicate or produce human-like thinking. I'm not all that interested in human-like thinking. We've got 7 billion people to choose from. I'm interested in machine thinking. So let me give you one graphic example. Many, many years ago, I was called in by the Vice Squad. The deal was, you know, they have Mr. Plods, and they sit with a book, and they were looking through all these awful photographs all the time. Could we automate it so they didn't have to do it? Because it burned, the images just burn in your brain. And so we started, and one of the things we had to do was, is it male or is it female? Got a neural network, photograph, male, male, female, male, male, female. We did this for quite some time. Now let's test it. Stick in a photograph, male, female, perfect. Question is, how is it doing it? You and I will look at male and female, and we look for femininity and masculinity. How does the machine do it? Whiskers and mascara. So it's kind of interesting that every time I've lifted the lid on neural networks, I've discovered that they're getting the right answer by mechanisms that I've not thought of. It's always a surprise, but I think they're a bit self-limiting, is my observation. Any other questions, folks? Oh, there's several over here. I'm worried about the guy on the front here. Give it to him first.
Thanks, Peter. Given that we have the democratic systems that we currently have in our society here, how would you advise our government and legislators to adapt for this speed of technological change? Because legislation is always so far behind and, you know, either restricting or, you know, we're trying to do the responsible thing, but clearly it hasn't adapted for this new world.
I saw a cartoon the other day. I thought it was brilliant. There was a surgeon with his team in midway through an operation, and the surgeon says to the team, okay, let's have a vote on what I do next. And we had an alarming statement from a government minister a few months ago. I said, we've had enough of experts. I think that the fault does not lie on one side alone. I do not think that professional institutions do a really good job of work in informing politicians and decision makers well enough and explaining. And I put my hand up for my own engineering profession. So, my line is, just because you're an engineer doesn't mean to say you have to be boring. It is not mandatory. However, you go to most engineering lectures, and I do, and they're appalling, and the amount of communication is very slim. You can't understand what they're saying, and it's very bad. We need to inform very explicitly the decision makers, the policy makers, what the implications are of what they're about to do. I've totally failed to be able to do that in more than one company, where I've had models that have shown that we're going to go over the edge of a cliff, and although I've explained it, they've continued and they've gone over the edge of a cliff. You know, because the approach has been simple-minded. And I think we could do with, if I had a wish, every politician would go on a systems course and they would learn about thermodynamics, just basic stuff, and it would transform the way they think. You know, to spend umpteen billions on wind farms and solar power to suddenly discover that the wind doesn't blow all the time and the sun's not out all the time and we can't close down these power stations after all because we've still got to have the spinning metal. And to be running the national grid with less than 1% spare capacity is insane, absolutely insane. And market forces will destroy the planet, will wipe out every single species, including us. Imagine we have a complex, let's just think for a moment about complex systems. The weather system. Could you predict the weather on the basis of a thermometer? I don't think so. You need many, many parameters and a lot of information to predict the weather. Earthquakes, we've still not mastered that. Complex system. Financial system of the planet. We are going to control and predict the outcome of an economy on the basis of a single parameter, the dollar. It's insane. We need at least another 2 parameters. The implications of any decision we make on society and the impact on the ecology of that decision, as well as the financial axis. And I think there are more. But getting a system to change, Graham, is a nightmare, as you know. Even in a modest-sized company or a giant corporation, let alone a country. I find it quite frightening what the politicians are capable of amongst the sea of ignorance, period. There was another gentleman over here.
Yes. Hello there.
Sure. Yeah, you are...
this kind of overlaps with what you've just said to a certain extent, is that you were saying earlier that in Eastern societies they have this much more positive attitude towards education, and PhDs are revered, whereas the opposite seems to be the case here. And is it that you were just highlighting that politicians have the problem, whereas actual fact maybe it's our actual culture and society which has the problem? Can AI solve that?
It's a really tough problem. I can only make an observation on that. The most successful companies in the world are, when you go and have a look at their board, they've got an awful lot of engineers, mathematicians and scientists on the board. And the really big companies like GE and Rolls-Royce, for example, are all engineering-led. BMW is engineering-led. It's not accountant-led, and it's not management science-led.
But you would argue that, say for example, that Apple was design-led.
I used to have
for example, is Dieter Rams and people like that. That's design-led, and design and aesthetics and those sorts of things are working hand in hand with technologists. in order to create a culture that society accepts.
If Steve did anything, he was quite a leader. He could see, and I mean, quite brutal in the way he did things. But he was a huge motivator. But the Apple model, I think, is ahead of most. They develop more or less nothing. They research nothing. They go around the world looking for interesting technologies and pull them together and then integrate them into a fabulous product. That's what they do. That's the design bit. But those base technologies have to come from somewhere. And what has actually happened in my lifetime is it's what I call the sandals and the suits problem. They don't mix well. So in most giant corporations, the research has more or less disappeared, and the research is being outsourced. And they look for it, and they either buy startups or they acquire their products, then glue them together. And that seems, and even Google is a bit like that. But Facebook, you know, they're trying to break that mold. But it really is a conundrum. I wish I had the answer. I'd be really rich. Sir.
We're in a university, and I think you've spoken quite a lot about education tonight. What are the implications of what you've said for education, and what are your recommendations for what needs to happen to education, specifically, I suppose, in this country?
Well, I've had the great joy of having 4 children of my own and inheriting 2. And the only things that I tried to advise them on were how to become a reasonable human being, how to treat other people, some moral aspects, some of the legal aspects, and I put before them a huge table of opportunity. They worked all over the world before they graduated, so in that clutch there's an architect, an investment banker, computer scientist, sound engineer turned project manager, pharmacist, psychologist turned school teacher. They've gone their own way. But what I did was I had a program, and at home we solved problems by thinking, whereas in the education system they solve problems by turning handles. So I don't want to frighten you to death. This is not a test, but I very much doubt if there's more than 3 or 4 people in this room understand why long multiplication works. And be honest, you don't have to, it's embarrassing, but be honest, how many of you did logarithms at school? Now, be honest, how many of you know why? Exactly, all right? You could get monkeys to do this stuff. It's not very useful. So what I try and do with my students is to try and get them to grasp and understand the core things, because the key thing is not the minutiae, but understanding the processes and the subtleties. And so I really challenge them by giving them problems. So my exam questions are kind of fun. The first third is regurgitate. You know, you get marks if you listen to what I said and you could repeat it. Good man, you're a parrot. The second half is, third is, can you solve a problem, the like of which you've seen before? Brilliant, you can apply it, a few more marks. Then the dog end of it, the last third of the problem, here is a problem you never saw before, you have no idea if there's an answer, you've got 20 minutes to do your best, and what I'm interested in there is, what is your thought pattern, how did you tackle it, and there may not be an answer to this problem, but I'm not revealing that, but it's getting people to think the right way. Now, it's interesting that in some families, you will get a child who is unbelievably bright and solves problems, and the other 2 or 3 are process people. They're great for a bank or a supermarket or something. They turn handles. They can do processes day in, day out, all the time, and they're brilliant at it. And we need a lot of those guys and gals. Terrific. But the thing that we've got to have is a huge cadre of people who can see a problem that they've never seen before and find a solution. That's the challenge. I work in security quite a bit, and there are some good challenges there. So and sometimes you need evil thinking to tackle the problems. You have to think like a bad person to be able to do the stuff. And if I could breed a bunch of students who had a great ability to solve problems, I would be so pleased. I would be really so pleased. And it is a challenge. There's another couple of questions down on the front row here. There's a young lady here.
Within, is it on? I think
it is on. Yeah.
Within sort of museums or art galleries, do you think technology will change that to how people use?
I would hope so. You know, in old museums and stuff, my kids criticise me still for the number of museums I took them to. You know, I just find it interesting. A good example is go up to Sutton Hoo. The most interesting thing at Sutton Hoo is looking how they made swords. These guys knew diddly squat about metallurgy, but they had the sense to twist the metal and then flatten it and weld it, and they had metal that was both flexible and sharp-edged and strong. And they beat the carbon out of it with a hammer. And it wasn't till a long, long time, hundreds and hundreds of years, that Bessemer came along and we were able to boil off all the carbon entirely and then put in less than 1% and make the carbon, the iron into steel, or good iron as they used to call it. So the challenge for the people doing museums is imparting the knowledge in a more exciting, more radical, faster way so that people can actually understand it. You know, I guess I can afford two confessions in one lecture. One of the most enlightening moments in my life is to stand in front of class teaching a subject, a student comes up and challenges, and I have that revelation which goes something like, whoa, I've been getting the right answer for the wrong reasons for the last 30 years. It doesn't actually work like that. That dawn of realization, you can stumble about thinking you understand stuff. Now, here's what's actually going wrong. On any one day of the week, you will find 200 lecturers teaching quantum mechanics, and 3 of them have got Nobel Prizes. What you want to do is not sit in front of the 197. You want to be with the Nobel Prize guys. So you somehow can use the technology for the students to go with the best. The value of the 197 is to give tutorial help in understanding, getting down to the fine core, the subtlety of what is happening. That's where I see, and you know, libraries were dead eons ago, and they're really dead now. We need something much different. So I think that I've been to the Science Museum. I've given the Science Museum tons of equipment that I had that they hadn't got, and it's all in the computing and communication section. And I think they're doing a really good job of changing the nature of a museum. And it's challenging. And despite the fact I haven't got any kids, I still go to museums. Sir, if you can just pass that on. And then we've got a gentleman right at the back.
Thank you, Peter.
This gentleman at the back, okay.
Well, thank you for an excellent presentation. Perhaps a bit of a controversial question. AI is not new, and we had, could remember, 1984, we were programming with horrendous languages called Lisp and Prolog and developing knowledge-based expert system. Of course, our collective knowledge is much more advanced than then, but even then we're relying on human knowledge to build these systems. And they're as good as our knowledge, or aren't they?
Right. Okay, so let me take that head on. The formula that I developed, there's a gentleman called Ray Kurzweil who is kind of a guru in this area, and he puts up his formula where intelligence is proportional to computing power and memory. Wrong. And so let me give you a couple of examples. If you get comatose patients. And I mean patients who've been comatose, a state of being dead for 10 years. You slide them into an MRI scanner and you whisper in their ear, I want you to think about playing tennis. About 60 or 70% light up, as you and I would. So these people are entombed in this meat space, and they've got no means of communication. And so in the formula that I put together, I was able to show that the most powerful aspect of intelligence is the sensory system and the output mechanism. This is the most intelligent being in the universe. Unfortunately, it's got no output, so it can't tell you, therefore it's a dead piece of metal, is what I'm saying. So communication is a vital part, censoring and communication is a vital part of intelligence, and we're handing sensory system to the AI systems, and we're walking around, camera, microphone, but most importantly, GPS. I'll give you an example. So this came right out of security. If I can read your mobile phone, I can tell you're in a car, I can tell you're accelerating, I can tell you slowing down, I can tell you going around a traffic island, and I can tell you journeying left or right. So if I want to characterize your journey, I can do that in terms of the accelerometer output from this. There's a lot of information there about what is happening to you or what you're doing. So the trick is going to be that our sensors are actually going to look rather puny compared to the machines, and they will be getting far more information. And I think that's a game changer. But I'm with you. I can remember writing a piece, and I think the title was "Where is HAL 9000?" And it's somewhere, it's on my, I was getting really frustrated. We had the movie 2001, HAL 9000, brilliant. Okay, where is it? And it was always, it's 30 years away, it's 30 years away. Well, this infant has grown up a little bit like that, and it's starting to accelerate. So it's kind of exciting. Last question over in the back, sir.
Thank you, Peter. How do we create a more exciting, stimulating environment for startups in Suffolk? And how do you see the university and industry collaborating to make that happen?
I have a friend. I was collaborating with him just before the dot-com bust. He got out of trouble by buying a bank and putting all his debt into a bank. And then he created a company called Scanadu. And Scanadu is creating the Bones scanner, straight out of Star Trek. A scanner that you just run up and down someone and you get a medical readout. He has corralled intellectual property from all over the world, including Russia. And when I last went to see it, it was about the size of this room, laid out on lab benches, all the wires everywhere, and it was sort of working. The first product has hit the market. Now, the story is interesting because he was in Belgium. He went for funding in Belgium. He was offered 100 grand. He went to Silicon Valley, and they immediately gave him 10 million. In the second year, he was given 100 million, and in the third year, he was given another 100 million. There is a European company with European ideas, a European startup, and we're going to be buying that product back from the United States. Frankly, the startup funding monies in Europe compared to the United States fall into the pathetic category. The attitude of the people that fund the companies in the United States is, how do we make you a big success? In Europe, the attitude is, how do we get your shirt, your house, and your car if you fail? And you will work to the beat of a drum. And it's a very, very difficult environment. And I've started many companies. I mean, I was one of the founders of eBookers. Don't ask me how, but that went from 0 to £1 billion turnover in 4 years flat. It was a really wild ride. I was also the first person to put money into Shazam Entertainment, and that has only recently hit £1 billion valuation after 16 years. Now, had you asked me on day one which one was going to skyrocket and which one was going to probably fail, it would have been the other way around. So I don't know anything about doing startups. All I know is I struck lucky a couple of times. It really is fly fishing, you know, or backing horses. Really very tough. You need a strong stomach and you need unbelievable tenacity to make a company go. And I always say to students when they start in a company, the idea is worth nothing. It takes no energy and no money to have an idea. Even the first working prototype isn't worth very much. 95% plus of the money is getting the damn thing to market and getting somebody to buy it. That's the killer. Really, really tough. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been a great audience. I hope you've enjoyed the evening. I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, for a very, very informative and thought-provoking and enjoyable night. It's an absolute pleasure to have you, an absolute pleasure. Looking forward for the prospect of working together collaboratively. Ladies and gentlemen, before we draw the evening to a conclusion, I'd like to invite you to go and join us in drinks and cannabis, and join me for a last upload to thank Peter. Thank you.
Pleasure. My pleasure.